Could some of the remarkable events shown in this film be the result of human paranormal abilities like psychokinesis, the claimed ability of the mind to directly affect matter?
There's an enormous amount of evidence for the existence of psychokinesis. In the laboratory, we're talking mainly about the evidence of human consciousness on random number generators and very small events that can be totally controlled. There is clear evidence that people can affect things.
One of the most famous practitioners of psychokinesis, or PK, was a Russian housewife called Nina Kulagina. Kulagina was able to demonstrate her abilities under strictly controlled conditions in front of a team of scientists. Researchers who investigated her were convinced she was able to do this solely by the power of her mind. So could the Skull Group and their visitors unwittingly have created some or all of the phenomena using mind over matter?
As an explanation, although it's not more than just simply a label to it, this is psychokinesis in physical mediumship. Whether it is a spirit working through someone, a spirit acting directly on an object, or the medium's mind causing the things to move.
Say there were real mind over matter effects going on as opposed to conjuring tricks. Then how do we know they were coming from the minds of the disembodied people rather than from the minds of the mediums who were sitting in the room?
There is no definitive answer to this question. But the theory that these phenomena were due solely to psychokinesis from the living seems improbable, since PK produced in laboratories tends to be weak. Therefore, mind over matter from the living is unlikely to explain the huge range of phenomena featured in this film.
Emily, when did you live on the Earth?
Oh, a long time ago now.
19th century?
Yes.
We simply have a number of clues of information which was extremely unlikely to have derived from the subconscious mind or the conscious mind of the medium. And the more impressive those are, the less likely it is that you can say that this is an aspect of mediumship. And the more likely it is, it's an aspect of discarnate communication.
Previously, we travelled with the Skull Group to Italy, where they first met with Marcello Bacci. They say they were able to talk to the spirits via his radio.
Come on, who's this? Come on, I'm here. Time stream.
But when the Skull Group visited Bacci in a later session, he was having problems. For months, hundreds of people who came from around the world in the hope of hearing their dead loved ones were bitterly disappointed. All they heard was static. Bacci was depressed. He feared he had lost his unique talent. Then, in an extraordinary piece of luck, as our cameras rolled in an interview with Bacci, the radio, which had been silent for so long, burst into life.
Chiudete tutto! Cosa del cammin da radio? Del cammin da radio.
Grazie Gregorio, però ci sono, vi prego, stasera sapete.
Bacci's drought was over. When the radio voice stopped, there was celebration.
Mamma mia, mamma mia che gli hanno detto.
Bacci felt he'd regained his ability to communicate with the spirits. But then joy turned to disappointment as he thought he had failed to record the voice.
Madonna, non è partito.
No.
Era solo il tuo.
No, era partito, l'ho spento io, vai. L'ho già messo indietro.
Ah, te?
Mi fa sì.
Poveretto, l'ho desiderato. Io poi dico, ma
l'ho messo già io indietro.
Once the recording was transcribed, Bacci told us the voice belonged to a spirit called Gregorio, a Catholic friar who had died many years ago. Later, Independent researcher Dr. Toriello read the last part of this ghostly message.
Man, he passed his time just deceiving himself, okay? But when all of you will be here where we are, okay? Then you will find the answer to all your questions. I'm sorry, I cannot say more.
We do look down on our friends and loved ones after we die until such time as we move on to some other dimension. I think you can think what you like, really.
Despite the evidence from Skoll and Bacci, most scientists still refuse to even consider the possibility that consciousness might survive death. Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, the internationally renowned biologist and Skoll investigator, offers an explanation.
There's a dominant materialism in science that grew up in the 19th century. It's become part of the culture of science, but it's really a dogmatic belief system rather than a testable theory.
What this means is that scientists have become completely focused on the things they can both measure and replicate in labs.
Within science, based on a materialist point of view, the mind is the brain. So anything that suggests the mind might be more than the brain goes against the theory, and therefore most scientists don't want to know about it.
Another prominent scientist not convinced that consciousness is solely the result of brain activity is Dr. Charles Tart.
But that's just a small part of the spectrum.
Dr. Tart is Emeritus Professor of Psychology at the University of California and a leading researcher into the evidence for life after death.
The idea that survival of bodily death is impossible and that we're nothing but our brains and bodies is really a function of an outmoded view in science, a Newtonian worldview. Now, the Newtonian worldview works very well for everyday events, but one of the most interesting things about modern science, especially when you look at stuff like quantum theory, is that the world is far more mysterious than we think. And we now have experimental evidence of what Einstein called spooky action at a distance, that we can instantaneously affect something in a distant part of the universe. That's really wild. If consciousness has any of the qualities of this quantum level of existence, then phenomena like survival of bodily death are probably not so mysterious after all.
But could quantum theory explain one of the most shocking experiments conducted at Skoll?
This particular experiment was perhaps the most important experiment of the whole series.
Previously, we showed how visitors reported seeing these balls of light appear before them.
It's like fireworks!
On this occasion, one of them flew inside a large quartz crystal.
The crystal then levitated. We could see it glowing, and then descended into a Pyrex bowl. Then Arthur Ellison was invited to pick it up. He picked it up and satisfied himself that it was there and it was glowing, and he put it down again. He was asked right away to pick it up again. He tried to, and his fingers closed right over it. It had dematerialized.
There's nothing there, yes, it looks the same, but there's nothing there.
Then he was asked to pick it up again, and it rematerialized in his hand.
Oh, I can feel the crystal now.
Now this dumbfounded him. This is what finally convinced him that this was real, because it couldn't have been faked in any way. And he had his head right over the top of the bowl in order to ensure that no hand or no instrument could interfere with it.
Of course, we were totally amazed by this. Things do not materialize and dematerialize. This is against all the laws of nature. We're trained scientists, of course. We know how the world behaves, and it doesn't behave like that.
When you really think what we're experiencing now, yes, it's amazing. Miracle, yes.
But what does this remarkable demonstration tell us